Welcome back to Behind the Play. My name is Alex Adams, and today I am joined by the one and only Ron MacLean, the host of Hockey Night in Canada. Thanks so much, Ron, for doing this. I know this is a busy time of year with the NHL season fast approaching, and 10-year-old me, watching you as a kid is jumping up in joy, and 25-year-old me as well. So I really appreciate you coming on, Ron, and I hope all is well.
Absolutely, all is well. Just our buddy Kyle Bukowskis, because you're in Ottawa, Alex, obviously. So we were talking about Dana and Kyle, who had their amazing wedding in Canmore this summer, and he and I were just together at the Rogers campus in Toronto for publicity, photos, and promos for the upcoming hockey night season. So, yeah, I always go back to what it was like for me at even younger. I met Bobby Hull came to the Yukon when I was about 7 years old. He was an NHL player. It was my first-hand experience with anything NHL
Hmm.
or TV. So yeah, it's always nice to know what I felt like when I firmly believe, Alex, when we're 10, 11 is when we kind of set ourselves on the path we're on. So great to be with you.
I want to start a little bit with that, just about kind of getting started in the industry, and obviously you mentioned Bobby Hull. Just how did you get started in the industry? I know it's a kind of an interesting story at a radio station in Red Deer, so maybe just tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Dad was military. So was mom. But when they married, the rules were back in the late 50s, you couldn't be married in the military. One had to resign. So
Oh,
dad was the one. We followed him around. I was born in Zweibrücken, Germany, and we lived in
mhm.
Nova Scotia and Victoria and Whitehorse, Yukon. Is kind of where I fell in love with hockey because mom and dad were both politicos and artisans, but not really sports lovers.
Hmm.
But a neighbor in Whitehorse, Yukon, when I was roughly 5 years old, came by and said, "Ron, we have a backyard rink across the street. Why don't you join us?" And that's how I got into hockey. And then the broadcasting part happened innocently enough in high school in Red Deer. So this is the late 70s, mid to late 70s. We had a radio station in our high school. At noon hour, we would play music and guys would take turns being the DJ. So I did that. And a group of us were involved in the radio station at high school. Three of them were also working part time at the local radio in Red Deer, CKRD. And they would go down and just push buttons and play reel to reel tapes and flip a little toggle switch for station identification and all the things that used to happen on radio. And one day, Sean Sutherland was ill, and he said to Martin Smith, the boss, "Phone Ron. He will accept the $3 an hour." And it was a 9 hour board shift. And Martin phoned my father, answered, and Martin Smith, CKRD. "I'd like to speak to Ronnie MacLean if possible." Dad comes to the back door and says, "There's a Martin Smith from CKRD Radio would like to speak to you." And I thought, oh boy, what did I do last night? Was I out smashing into cars or something? High school kid, right? But that's what it was about. And I went down, learned how to do the very rudimentary operating. Eventually, I joined the rotation. Now there were four of us from the same high school working weekends, and they got us to read news at midnight on this FM station. We were all brutal. I remember, for some reason, I remember taking a stab at Seoul, South Korea, and
Oh
it's
no.
not a complicated word. It's good for Wordle, but I brutalized Seoul,
What
and
did you, how did you
yeah,
say it?
I said Seoul or something or
Okay.
Seoul. Yeah, I went phonetically, and I was probably doing that with many of the leaders of our time and their names. But I was good enough that they wanted me to be a DJ on the AM operation, spinning records overnight, still in high school. And
Wow.
it just snowballed from there. I eventually moved up to the noon to four slot on radio. They offered me full-time position at the end of grade 12, which is where you completed your high school in Red Deer. And when you got promoted to noon to four on the radio, you were automatically the TV weather presenter on their supper package.
Oh.
They had an FM, AM, and TV tri-entity. So they would take the noon to four DJ and just anoint them weather person at 6 in the evening. And I did that and got noticed by John Shannon of Hockey Night in Canada. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
At that time, were you like in Red Deer? Did you want to do hockey or what, or
No,
sports in
I
general?
actually tried to avoid it. Carrie, my wife now, was my girlfriend then, but the next door neighbor of the Vasilenic family, Carrie's name is Vasilenic, was Don Drummond, editor of the Red Deer Advocate sports section. And he was the kind of guy you could say, like I remember there was a pretty big leadership convention going on with the conservatives. Joe Clark would win in the late 70s,
Mhm.
leadership of the progressive conservatives, they called it back in the day. But I just happened to see Don Drummond on the street next to Kerry's home and said, "What do you think of the leadership race?" He says, "Oh, they got to give the captaincy to Gretzky." And no, that's, and I thought, you know what, that's how I'll be. I'll end up, socially illiterate. I'll be just focused on sports. So
I
it's my
see. Yeah.
hobby. I don't want it to be my livelihood. But eventually they just wore me down and said, look, Ron, you really like sports. It's what you know. It's like Joni Mitchell being taught early in her songwriting career by a prof in Saskatoon. Joni, that was great, but write what you know, and the rest is history. And so it was a lucky break that they talked me into doing the supper hour sports, and I did it without a teleprompter. I was just kind of in my zone, and John Shannon could recognize that from watching. He was in Calgary, headquartered with Hockey Night in Canada, and
Yeah.
he just saw something that God knows what he saw. Because honestly, Alex, I was a deer in headlights for the longest time, and I think you probably know, suffered horrible anxiety attacks from the
Yeah.
time I was around 17, 18 till the time I was 35. I would get these onsets of racing heart and out of breath and sweating, and just, yeah, I don't know how in the name I made it through those 20 years, but now, and we didn't talk about those things then.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure, sometimes I'm not even sure it helps to talk about those things because it's like a trigger. But you do
Mhm.
learn the biggest lesson that helped me, and I think helps us all, is to get out of ourselves. The dwelling about one's own status or appearance. If you can break the chain of that thinking and get into helping someone else and thinking about why you're there for someone else, always about the other, that seems to be, for at least me, a method of coping with that.
Going from that, just going to Hockey Night in Canada, talk about, I know everyone wants to know about you and Don Cherry because, you guys worked together for so long. And I know it's a interesting way, kind of like how you got to Hockey Night in Canada, but also to get the role of, working with Don Cherry. Just talk a little bit about that.
For sure. And I can remember, back to your whole thing about being 25 years old and yakking with Ron and Kyle, and you're in the industry and fascinated by what makes people tick who are in the industry. I used to go down, Alex, in Edmonton, the lower concourse of the then Northlands Coliseum.
Mhm.
I would go down when I'd go to an Oiler game, and I would look at Dave Hodge and Don Cherry, and I was kind of fascinated, just to see what they were like off camera. So you can imagine when I got to Toronto, what happened is Dave Hodge accepted a job. He was the primary host of Hockey Night in Canada, and he accepted a radio position at CKNW in Vancouver. It was big bones, like a six-figure salary and set for
Mm.
life kind of contract that Dave accepted at 41. Dave, you'd have to ask him this, but I think he used to have this feeling, I don't want to get old and gray on Hockey Night in Canada. I would like to sort of move on to something before that happens. Anyway, he had accepted this job, and there was one stipulation: he would continue with Hockey Night in Canada. However, when the Vancouver Canucks were home at the Pacific Coliseum, he wanted to anchor Hockey Night in
Mm.
Vancouver.
Yeah.
So CBC needed somebody to handle about 10 to 11 Saturday nights at Maple Leaf Gardens, where Canucks were playing out west and the Leafs were playing in Toronto. So I was kind of brought in, to replace Dave on the Wednesday night Leaf games. They had a regional package of about 25 Leaf broadcasts, plus the 10 or 11 Saturday nights at Maple Leaf Gardens. The first game of the year happened to be, there's a game in Vancouver, so Hodge is there. I come in to do Don Cherry in the coach's corner. And again, I'm wide eyed, and I've told the story a million times of the producer, Doug Sellers, God love him's gone now, died playing hockey at the age of 50.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
Really great producer. Freewheeler. A lot of folks are very buttoned down and, Lego in their approach to producing. Not Doug. He was all feel, and really
Huh.
enjoyed to work with for that reason. Anyway, Doug said to me, Ron, liked your work on the 2 years of Flames telecast, liked your work as the weatherman in Red Deer, etc. But you have this crazy thing where your eyes are always wandering up and down and all
Yeah.
around the guests. And so try to just, not be as noticeable or distracting when the guest, in this case Don, is talking. So I riveted my eyes on his, and they weren't going to budge. And as you know, when you think about eyes, you start to either flutter or, my left eye got watery, and this tear started going down my cheek. Now the camera's there, so the
They can't see
folks at
it.
home can't see it, but Don's looking at me thinking, geez, good grief, is this guy gonna bawl every time I say I like fighting? And but he saved me. He went the whole, like he always did, but he, that was 33 years before the end, where he would kind of just take it, and it saved me. And it was a, I woke up the next day expecting to see reviews. Honestly, I think about it, Alex, all the time. If there was Twitter, social media back in the day, that probably would have gotten pointed out, and that would have been
Mm.
a meme. And but it was an innocent time. In fact, when I replaced Dave Hodge full time, it was because Dave had thrown his pen and complained about them
Yeah.
not showing overtime in Montreal. There wasn't enough of a backlash in terms of immediacy. At least people wrote letters to the CBC, but he was long gone by the time those got to Toronto.
I see.
Yeah, big difference. And now everything is kind of an instant referendum.
I want to just ask about, I know you said in a couple interviews, just I find a really interesting way of describing your relationship with Don as like an arranged marriage and two AHL defensemen. Just
Yes,
describe what was it like, what was
because
it
we're
like to work with
total
them?
totally opposite politically in terms of our Don is very much the individual, and I'm not to stereotype either party in Canada or in the United States, but I think as a general rule, you could say on the right, it's about the rights of an individual. On the left, so they believe they want to be able to take care of their own money, take care of themselves. They feel there's safety in that approach. On the left, they want to have that safety net. They also want to, pursue careers, and there is status involved, but there's a sense that if I should fall through the cracks, I want this, to have my back. That's the collective approach of, and then obviously in every way we shape our laws and our more social mores. We try to combine the two, the individual rights and the rights of the collective. Very complicated, but Don and I made a good match because we were, always arguing those two sides of the story. Not so much on Hockey Night in Canada. It would come up, but you can't, turn it into crossfire. It had to be about hockey, and Don was good at that. Don had his version of hockey, which was, I'd say, carnal. He definitely saw who's courageous, who's not, and he felt, especially in his time, intimidation was an incredibly important aspect in the game. So he was very good on that front, and then as a relationship, as I said to you, I compared us to, in a way, two AHL defensemen who stick with it for a long haul. Were also Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, out of the famous book by Cervantes. We're kind of out trying to do good deeds, but we're kind of messing up each and every time. So many times I would try to be the professorial, well-read guy that's been studying ethics and give him some advice, and he would turn on me and make me look so bad, and he would take it to a level. Well, I'll give you an example, and this is, please, I don't want to trigger anybody because it's an Indigenous story,
Mhm.
but Chris Simon had a 30-game suspension for
Oh,
cross-checking a guy named Ryan Hallweg, and then he came back. The second game back, he stomped on Jarkko Ruutu of the Pittsburgh Penguins, took a skate and basically stepped on him. Got a 25-game suspension, and so the question is, how does what does that say about supplementary discipline that somebody can receive a 30-game suspension and not be convinced to straighten out? They come back and they do something equally bad. And I said, it's potential. Chris grew up in the First Nations experience where he might not have trusted authority. He might not have felt he was going to get a fair shake on those kinds of things. And that's why perhaps, it meant nothing to him to receive 30 games, and he thought nothing of doing it again. And Don said, what are you saying? Because he's Indian, he's got an inferiority complex. And I honestly melted like on the spot.
yeah.
And I remember, the backlash basically was against me in that position. And I can understand that too. That's where, when you enter into these hard conversations, it's all well and good to say that we like hard conversations, but the minute we
Mhm.
try it, get ready.
Yeah.
So, and Don was, he was just like rapier in that sense of his take on the world was instantaneous. There was no 4-second filter or delay. He had kind of thought through a way that the survival of the fittest and the survival of the individual is paramount. And so that made for a challenging and interesting 33 years. And I think, when we were a CBC show only, there was always going to be in government someone who said, yeah, no, he speaks for us.
Yeah.
When we became Rogers, and they had to be very careful about losing how many customers when you alienate a segment of society. It was trickier terrain. And we tried to, everybody tried to say to Don, this is, look, keep on doing what you're doing. If we get it wrong, an apology will be, the method to carry on. But Don was 86 and sick of, he just, apology in Don's world was always a sign of weakness. And,
Mhm.
again, love him. I couldn't talk him out of it. And then, the rest is where we sit here 5 years later.
How much do you think about kind of your time with Don Cherry and what
Well,
happened? And
yes, I don't. I do and I don't, Alex. You know, the one thing is I was always a DJ at heart. My basic approach to the industry was to try and make someone's day.
mm,
I thought I had it was almost like being a doctor without that, training. You were going to be in a line of work that was entertaining, educational. You see it in Kyle Bukauskas and how
yeah,
he
it's the
he
hair.
tells stories. Well, yeah, but his
Kidding.
storytelling is his
Yeah.
is his thing, right? And I'm that same way. So I mean, I did so many Olympics, so many World Track and Field, so many Commonwealth Games, closed Maple Leaf Gardens, did Canada Day on Parliament Hill several times, Stampede. And I mean, a lot of my life was not with Don.
Mhm.
We always treated everything like we were in a show together. We were great colleagues. But my first and only thought or consideration always or ultimately will be to a viewer, one
Mhm.
viewer. And that's how you kind of have to approach this
I
career.
I want to ask you because you said something interesting about how kind of the era of anchors is kind of passing by and now it's about panels, and obviously you host a panel on Hockey Night in Canada. How do you find a way to entertain the viewer but also let them kind of
Right.
have everyone talk and make it seamless and
Yeah.
entertaining at the same time?
Not easy. And I think, like when you had George Strombolopoulos try Hockey Night in Canada, had they allowed George to do what he's great at, interviews, one to one, I think George would have sung. But they didn't give him that chance. And the reason they're going basically with panels everywhere on television is a couple of things. Representation. It's an easy way to ensure that there's lots of different voices coming to the
Viewer.
thought or thread. But the other thing is they don't want what's called an anchor monster. They don't want the power of that individual who becomes bigger than the network, bigger than the boss. Uh, that is the I think American television, with whether it was Tucker Carlson or in the day Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon had the run of the evening shows.
Mhm.
Those were that was the traditional approach, one-to-one communication with a viewer that creates a relationship, creates companionship, which is ultimately the core of radio and TV. So when you have a symphony, that isn't really what makes those mediums successful, but it's a safer corporate approach. And
Mm,
yeah, so it avoids that pratfall of, Don's bigger than we have no way to control this phenomena because he's appointment television,
yeah.
which I mean, great. We
Yeah.
need appointment television. that's that's sort of the idea, but it's that's where we're at now. That said, to your question, for sure, I'll tell you when Gord Downey and the Tragically Hip did their final tour. First
Mhm.
stop was in Victoria, and I was there luckily just before the Rio Olympics, and with Carrie, my wife, and some friends, and we were watching the concert with the doctor who was his
Mm,
oncologist, and he was explaining to us how Robbie Baker had a guitar stand, and if he placed a guitar on that particular stand, that was an indication that Gord was having a tough time. Get down
mhm.
here. So there was a side drama going on to the whole thing. Anyway, it went off unbelievably well. Gord was incredible. Hip were incredible. After the show, we're back at the Empress Hotel in Victoria, and now I'm standing at the bar with Gord. And I'm thinking, shouldn't you get to bed? Like you're, kind of going through a lot here. But him and his brother Patrick, and Gord couldn't remember his own song lyrics at that point. He had to use the teleprompter for his song lyrics because of the brain cancer.
Mhm, of course.
But he said to me, "Well, Ron, it's going to be." I was coming back. George Stroumboulopoulos after 2 years. They wanted me to kind of be the principal guy at Hockey Night again. So we were discussing that, and Gord brought it up, and he said, "And Ron, you'll be as long as you elevate Nick, Kelly, and Elliot. That was the panel at that time: Nick Kyprios, Kelly Rudy, and Elliot Friedman. As long as you elevate those guys, it'll be great." And that's the same message. The exact same message I received in radio way back in the 70s from Wayne Heinrich, who said, "Let your guest be the star."
Huh.
So you do have to, as a host, but if you have and my wit can get me in trouble, of course, and my points of view can get me in trouble. So you want to know when to jump in with a quip to relax everybody so that they feel empowered to be loose themselves. And you also want to challenge them, so that you bring out the best in them. Like as an example with Gary Bettman, the harder the interview, the better the chance that he will be able to showcase his wares. He
Yeah.
didn't always see it that way, but that was the point of it all.
Yeah.
There's nobody wiser, more well informed, more inside on this subject than you, Gary. Now here goes. Tackle this question, and you can handle it. You should be able to handle it in your sleep. So you want to be a mix of all those things. And Alex, it's like biorhythms. It's there for you. Some days you're intuitive. You're absolutely able to. You have the gift of concision. It's a quick comment that sparks the debate. Some days you're just laboring. You're thick, and your experience teaches you to kind of recognize, like a coach, knowing what guys are going on the ice.
Yeah.
You kind of figure out pretty quick in the day, I don't have it today, so
When
button up.
did you when would you say you kind of learned that at the same time? And I know you
Well,
said
you never master that. Let me just start with that.
okay.
To this day, I have bad shows and bad days. But I was, again, through experience, I realized all the things, all the dwelling, within the head that gets you in trouble. A fear of a pronunciation of a name. If you're really hooked on the pronunciation of a name, guaranteed you'll screw up the word just before the name. You know,
Mm,
your mind takes you right out of the flow and into a spot down the line. And when you're thinking ahead, you know, I don't know what's worse, thinking about the past and dwelling on it, or thinking ahead. I think thinking ahead is worse. So you just
mhm.
slowly come to that realization as to, breathe and proceed. If you do hatchet a word or a name, fix it as best you can, and however long it takes, and no big deal. That's so human. It's inconceivable that we beat ourselves up to the extent we do. But everybody thinks, well, wow, there's 12 people who know how to drive that race car, and I don't. I got to learn how to
Yeah,
master
yeah.
that
No.
race car. You know,
Uh, what I find interesting that you said, you mentioned Bettman, and I know you have an annual interview with him that's you alluded to. I want to ask, not just with Bettman, but what's your kind of style to go into interviews? I know you talked about flow and
yeah,
kind of sometimes you have a
prep.
bad day.
All
Prep.
preparation, yeah, like you would have done to get set for this. You read extensively, you listen extensively to things that were said, and then in the case of what kind of took us out of where I thought we were at our best was when we were debating players' rights and the salary
Mhm.
cap.
Yeah.
I am vehemently opposed to the implementation of the salary cap. I understand it's created parity. Having said that, it hasn't helped a Canadian team in a smaller market win a Stanley Cup. So that's all a fallacy. But it was about the right. Again, now I was the one arguing the rights of an individual on that. I
Yeah.
just felt the players capped four ways when they join a team: maximum salary for themselves, maximum salary within the cap, and they have the entry level contracts and all these different things. They're drafted. Their rights are really, Connor McDavid makes 12 million. Every other sport, the top player is 50 million.
Make more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's way below market value. You ultimately, what you receive should be either your ability to put bums in seats or whatever the next best offer for your services would be. That said, there are some artificial wedges, so Gary could argue that back. But that's gone. Like with the union folding in 2006, as it did, the greatest debate, the one that, I could educate myself on. I used to go down to Ann Arbor and sit with Rod Ford, a professor of economics, and just go through this. And not just Rod, I would study with Marvin Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Last interview of his life, a whole
Yeah.
different ball game. Is the story of the establishment of the Major League Baseball Union.
Mm-hmm.
I would talk with all those sources, and then it was Gary and Ron, and it was great. Now it's like, let's just say, for the sake of argument, we're discussing Kyle Beach and
Yeah.
the tragedy of that situation. Well, now it's a whole different thing, because now Gary gets to be a spokesperson for the National Hockey League, and I don't feel comfortable that he gets that
Yeah. Yeah.
opportunity. That is not. I don't feel comfortable taking a legal issue and giving them the opportunity to voice their opinion, sway public opinion, influence courts and police. Very dangerous to enter
Do you
into
feel
that
this?
conversation.
Do you feel the same way about like the sexual assault allegations with the World
World
Junior?
Junior team, right? Who gets to speak to that? It's very important, I think, as a journalist, to know who has the right to speak to that particular situation. Obviously, everybody connected with the team does get the right to speak to that,
Yeah.
but heads of organizations, no. that's I would say you're better off to approach, Alison Forsyth, who's an expert on this subject. I think you need to take a kind of a nonpartisan approach to the topic, and don't allow a defense from stakeholders. It's very very interesting, conundrum, because you think they're the source, but clearly they're going to protect their interests. So that's the question you always like. It kind of goes back to Woodward and Bernstein and
Mm,
Mark Felt and the
yeah.
Watergate scandal. They were held up as pantheons of journalism. That's not the word I'm looking for. Anyway, they were
Yeah,
held.
sure. You could. Yeah, you could say
Yeah,
pantheons, like the
and
leaders.
yeah, so they broke that story, but it was a story broken for the express purpose of getting at the Republicans. There was a method behind it, and so without identifying the source, we could never ask, how did you know who ultimately
Hmm.
did the damage. That whole thing about sources and whether they should be revealed it's because it's almost tantamount to a non-disclosure agreement.
Yep.
The minute you seal off the flow of information is the minute you can't really trust it.
I want to go off that. I wasn't expecting to go down this road, but
Yeah,
I think we should just, this is my last one on this kind of, but where do you see, because I've talked to people like David Amber, who obviously you know well, and others
yeah.
last year, more or less, when there was the sexual assault allegations and Cal Beach. But where do you see the state of hockey right now in terms of maybe like the culture, really?
Yeah, I don't think the culture's broken. I think, look, we are going through an incredible time in society, from hashtag Me Too to Black Lives Matter to Truth and Reconciliation, all forms of social advancement, awareness, learning to see how others have lived and with what, and learning. Sheldon Kennedy was, in case I'm sure David Amber would have brought up Know My Name by Chanel
Mhm.
Miller, is the story of a rape case, incredible book. I've got Anita Hill up on the bookshelf here. I got a million books on that whole topic. But these are all, this is a hard won situation we're in. We are challenging status quo. We are challenging the life as we knew it. But it has to be done. I don't know if it has to be done Saturday nights on Hockey Night in Canada.
Mhm.
That's the challenge. But I do think you almost bear a responsibility when you have a flagship show, when you have a kind of every element of society involved in this, and it's a sit down. We're all in front of the TV on a Saturday night or a playoff night. As long as it isn't too heavy handed or, it's too preachy, I think it's really important to go there. But just as I said to you earlier, Alex, is how do we go there? Who you think you're going to the voice of expertise in, say, the commissioner or the head of Hockey Canada, or you're not. You need to go outside the box on that. You need to get to, and this is even complicated because, I would have said in the past, you go to the police or the judiciary.
But it,
I would say, yeah, sure, there's challenges there.
yeah.
There's a lot of right now angst about the state of the Supreme Court in the United States, and
Mm.
whether this is ultimately right from wrong, as Dershowitz would say. So we're really learning right now how to best approach these really difficult subjects. But it's universal to society. Back to your point about hockey, it's not just a hockey, and
No.
that sounds like an exoneration or broad exoneration, but I believe, hockey, like anything else, when something is that popular, it sort of bears the responsibility. It is the lightning rod of any given topic. So in our country, it can be a great torchbearer, and as such, we should try our best to be informed. And Hockey Canada just had their summit, and their basic first summit was about hyper masculinity. They billed it
Mhm.
as toxic masculinity, but realized that's too hard a word. That
Yeah.
alienates every man in the audience, supposedly. So finding the way to communicate these ideas, and it's just going to require learning upon learning. But I think in the end, as I say, it'll be a hard fought one battle that we should fight and should try to win.
Well, from one kind of tough situation to one tough job, and that's being a referee. And I know that you were a referee for a long time. If people don't know, you were a referee in an NHL preseason game, which is pretty cool. What was that like? And maybe how do you feel about kind of how there's a lot of criticism towards referees, especially in this day and age with social media. How do you feel about that? And maybe just tell us what your experience was like being a referee.
Well, I worked the game with Steve Wacom, who was the director of officiating. We went in at the start of the second period. So I did the second period, third period, and overtime. And lots of things struck me. I was on the ice with Sidney Crosby.
Yep.
So I wish I had a nice photo of myself dropping the puck between Danny Briere and Sidney Crosby. But a funny story about that is start of the second period, Crosby comes to Briere to line up at the dot and says to Danny Briere, $5. So they placed a bet over the draw, who would win that draw. Very funny.
That's funny.
I made a terrible call, to try and buy into their system of calling everything that moved. I hated it. I was a let them play referee, and those days are gone. I found it's two-man system, so you skated primarily backwards. You were waiting in the neutral zone for the play to come your way, and instead of in the old days where I'd be caught by the goal and tried to race the 200 feet to stay with the play, and you needed to be a really good skater. Now you were kind of drifting in center ice, and then you had to be backwards skating into the zone and really good at backwards quick moves to get out of the corner when the play came your way. But yeah, that's this. The referee is the one person, like the judiciary, like the police. In an ideal world, they're the one non-vested interest out there. Everyone else, from fan to player to coach, they all have a particular point of view based on winning for themselves. Selfish. I loved the training of refereeing for that. It's very good training for broadcasting, is to sort of see a altruistic purpose to facilitate fairness. To enable or elevate the state of the game by creating just that right, back to our conversation about what makes for a good panel conversation. You do have a role to play by knowing when to put the whistle away, whether people want to believe it or not. The perfect referee is the one who senses, okay, safety scoring chance was compromised. That's got to be a penalty. But after that, and sometimes you do in the early going set, an example with one call just to allow them to know you're there to prevent anarchy. But it's with two referees, how do you get that right? I always liken it. How would it be if there was two umpires behind home plate? I'd love to see, what the two calls would be.
How often, I guess, were you doing two referees like when you were refereeing? It was always one. Okay. Because I always wonder how much referees look at each other and see who makes who puts their hand up, or like the kind of indecision and all of that.
You got to say to yourself, in the 82nd game of the year, when the playoff assignments are about to be made, and a call is made right in front of them. Now, I always point this out: the referee down by the play has to watch the puck, because he's the one looking for high sticks. He's the one looking for it going in. It's the referee in the neutral zone who's got a wider view of, and actually the referee in the neutral zone takes the slot. That's his first priority. So the penalty will be made from 90 feet away, and everybody's up in arms. Yeah, well, the guy right there didn't see it. No, because the guy right there is more specifically focused on the puck. But anyway, it leads to some sense of embarrassment when you're the referee right there, and the guy 90 feet away makes the call on you. You have to learn, and they talk about it endlessly. You're a team, and everybody's free, to make a call. So no hard feelings. It's not making you look bad when somebody makes a call right on your doorstep. It's got to be that way. That's the purpose of two referees.
What would you say, to transition back to just your broadcasting career, what would be like a couple memories or a story that really stands out for you? I'm sure you have plenty and remember them all very vividly, but is there one with either Don Cherry or the NHL? I know you have one with Bettman in the 99 year.
That's a great story, of course.
Okay, go for it then.
I'll tell that one. And this is Don and I had worked the Buffalo-Toronto third round series that ended in 5 games, and we came home supposedly for a weekend off because the Colorado-Dallas series was ongoing, but Scott Russell was anchoring for CBC, and we thought we were home and cool, Don and I. We'd have 3 days off. No, the phone rings. We need you down there. It's a Saturday night, the long weekend. We would love you to May 24. We'd like you on the show. So we'll just do Coach's Corner. But Ron, you'll host. Scott will become the rinkside reporter. So we get on a plane on game day, Saturday, fly down to Dallas, Texas. Don goes to the hotel to get his suit ready. I go right to the rink, and Scott Russell's already there, and he points out he's got this device. Let's say it's this mouse. He says, that's a Humidex, Ron. And he says, the big issue here is the relative humidity. When you go on the air, what I've been doing is I just press this red button, and it indicates the RH. And if the relative humidity is 95% or higher, it's a real problem for Dan Craig, the ice maker. So I go on the TV and, good evening. Welcome to Game 7. The one big storyline here is the conditions of the ice surface at Reunion Arena. It's an old rink. It's 104 degrees today in Dallas, down by the tarmac around the rink. It's closer to 140, if you can imagine. So what they've done is they've put some air ventilation ducts in the ceiling, and they've opened all the vomitory exits 4 inches. They've cooled the ice by an extra degree. But if the relative humidity happens to be higher than 95, none of that will matter. So here we go. And I press the red button, and it's 99. So I said, well, that's a very serious situation. We could have a problem by the time we reach the third period tonight. In any event, here's a feature now on the late, great Rocket Richard. And as soon as I threw to the feature, Gary Bettman, commissioner of the NHL, was in that Zamboni area. He comes rushing over to me. Ron, why do you have to be so negative? And I thought to myself, well, come to think of it, he's right. I don't know why. I just came down off an airplane and I was told to talk about the RH. I wasn't really thinking of it through. But anyway, I argued back and forth with Bettman, as we always did. Two banter boosters went at it. And now I go to the dressing room. We finished the pregame. I go into the little dressing room where Don Cherry is waiting to do his Coach's Corner. That's all he's doing that night. So he's with the boss. Alan Clark was his name. And I go into the room and I said, wow, Gary Bettman was hot at me for talking about the ice conditions. And Don says, oh, is that right? Would you like a coffee? And I said, yeah, I'd love a coffee. Black would be great. So he goes and gets me a coffee, and that's the last we talk about that. Now we get on the air, Coach's Corner. The red light on the camera goes on, and Don, hold it before we get rolling here. A little something I got to get off my chest. A smart guy here. You're a wise guy. Hey, you think you know everything. Well, here's a couple of things, Ron, you don't know. Number one, they just come out of Denver, Colorado the other night. I made hockey in Denver, of course. But anyway, just come out of Colorado. Do you know how many consecutive sellouts? No, you don't, wise guy. You don't know how many, do you? 350 consecutive sellouts in Denver. Unbelievable. Come down here for Game 7. It's ESPN just said in the USA Today, it's the most watched hockey series in history. Did you know that? You didn't know that, did you? And I bet you didn't know we got Roy versus Belfort. We got Sakic versus Medano. We've got a long weekend in Canada. It's a Saturday night. 1 game winner take all for the right to go to the Stanley Cup. Everybody's in a good mood, except you, Ron. Oh, no. Ron from Red River, you got to stand there with your stupid little thermometer and try and ruin it for everybody. Can't you just give it a rest? And I knew he had me, right? It was the greatest little put on. So as soon as we did the end of the Coach's Corner, in comes Gary Bettman, walks right through the door of our dressing room. And thank you, Don. Thank you, Don. And it's so funny. That is a great memory. And I just remember Grapes had a lime green suit. He was coming down the atrium. It was an elevator in the atrium at our hotel, and everybody in the hotel is looking at this guy. Who is he? Those were fun times for sure.
I ask a lot of hockey people on this show what they do if they were the commissioner for the day. And obviously, Bettman, as you just talked about, what rule would you change if you were Gary Bettman for one day?
I should have the answer to that. I mean, I don't like the trapezoid, so I'd let goalies go out there and fend for themselves in their own zone. That's one I'd immediately ixnay. I think after that, there's not a ton I would change. No, I think that's probably the only one that jumps out at me. Right
and
now.
maybe the salary cap. That's the one.
Oh, for sure. I'm opposed to the cap. I would like to have a luxury, at least a luxury for the top player on your payroll. I would like, the Leafs and all these teams, they hire, when they drafted last year, they must have had 50 people on stage. They employ, so many people. So they're spending the money, and you could say wisely, but it's like the Toronto Blue Jays, and all those analytics experts that, that's the first time. That's 2 years in a row for Toronto. And I remember when Pat Cash took his pitcher out and cost Tampa a couple of years ago. I remember saying to Kyle Dubas, it would have set analytics back 100 years. And he went after me. Kyle was a proponent of the analytics and got to follow that. So that's an interesting debate, but it's kind of
Yeah.
outside my realm.
I want to ask, maybe why Kyle Dubas and so many other Canadian GMs have failed to win a Stanley Cup in 30 years. Why do you think like some of the factors are for that?
Well, in the case of '04, the Flames, '06, the Oilers, 2011, Kevin's team, the Vancouver Canucks, Kevin Bieksa. I mean, they lost Dan Hamhuis, and they were that close. They led the NHL in every category, much like Boston was a runaway
Yeah.
leader of everything last year, and they lost. Pressure seems to be daunting to me. When you're the Canadian team, you become like the Blue Jays, Canada's team, and you've got the weight of that, whether you know it or not. That seems to be a factor. Obviously, it's hard to attract free agents. The tax laws are so favorable in the United States. That said, the Canadian dollar is usually weaker, so when you're making your 12 million in Edmonton, your cost of living is different. It's better. You're using U.S. dollars to buy Canadian product at Canadian value. But I think that's probably two of the things I think about the most is hard to attract. The free agent has a choice. They tend to go. That's why Edmonton was so lucky and fortunate to pick up Matthias Ekholm. That was just a great get. That doesn't happen that often.
Do you have a favorite Canadian team going into this year? Is it
Oh, Edmonton for sure. Yeah,
okay?
I think Edmonton's right on the cusp. I think they had to sit with that. A
Oof.
lot of things about it. It was a team that was 2 points ahead of them in the standings. Vegas was a amazing road team. They only lost 7 in regulation on the road last year, and that's always a sign. And it's interesting with Edmonton. Jack Campbell's a very good road goalie. He has struggled in his own rink, so they're up against it, trying to figure out, okay, is Stewart the guy or is Jack the guy? Jack can win you those road games, which are, I think, always a harbinger of whether you're going to win the Stanley Cup. If you're a good regular season road team, get ready; they'll be good. Dallas was, a few others. Boston obviously was. Um, they sat with the Petrangelo slash. They sat with the loss. In the end, they're probably saying to themselves, "Okay, I love Jonathan Marchessault, but is he better than Connor McDavid? No. Is William Karlsson better than Leon Draisaitl? No. Like this can't happen. We can beat these guys." They've got to be thinking that way, and that just had happened to Detroit. They had an incredible team, but they had to keep fumbling until finally they got so mad about it that you just weren't going to stop them. So I think Edmonton is my favorite.
Just to go off that one, I would love to see an NHL team just play a tandem of Jack Campbell on the road and Stuart Skinner at home. That'd be pretty funny and cool to see.
Right.
I'd love that story. On goaltending, Ron, just it feels as though goaltending feels like obviously Aiden Hill won the Stanley Cup as a starter. Um, do you think goaltending's a bit of voodoo, or do you think there's like it's a
Well, I
clear
think
like
if you have a team like Toronto, you have to have a great goalie because their defense isn't strong enough to withstand. Like when Edmonton eventually had a great defense. I mean, you look at that '79 draft. They got, of course, Kevin Lowe first, then Messi and Anderson, but they also signed Charlie Huddy as a free agent. So almost from the get go, they had a good defense. They had Lee Fogelin, a stalwart. Veteran who led them. They brought in Randy Gregg, big, massive, well-educated,
doctor?
incredible defenseman. Yeah, doctor. Don Jackson, another university guy. It's interesting, in the Battle of Alberta back in the 80s, Calgary in 84, 85, my rookie season, they had 11 NCAA Division I players. That's
Oh my gosh.
1984. Shocking. Yeah, they discovered especially ECAC, they discovered the talent pool that ultimately Kenny Holland and Håkan Andersson would find in Sweden that emboldened Detroit. And
Mm-hmm.
Edmonton had 6 NCAA Division I players. Don Jackson was there, Glenn Anderson was there, Dave Lumley was Division I, Pat Hughes was Division I. They had Randy Gregg was obviously University of Alberta, Gord Shervin was Division I. So they had found a way to elevate their game through scouting college hockey. That's way ahead of the time. It's now, very commonplace, but it was a big advantage. And then as far as goaltending goes, and whether it's voodoo or not, I think Toronto needs Grant Fuhr, just the way Edmonton did in the early going to bail them out. If you have a great defense like Colorado had with Cale Makar and the rest, then you can have Darcy Kemper. Not knocking Darcy, but he's just a good goaltender that we can handle the job, just the way Aiden Hill is a very good goaltender who won't get you in any trouble. But it's the defense. Like Boston, as great as Allmark, that tandem was,
Their defense was
They're very underrated, right? Charlie McAvoy is like Hedman or Pronger or Chara or, one of those guys. And Hampus Lindholm's right behind him. And then they have Brandon Carlo, big, great defenseman, Matt Grzelcyk. Their defense, excellent. And so you think it's Marchand and Bergeron and Krejci and Pasternak, and it is, but it's also because they have a fantastic defense. You have to have that. Tampa had it, as much as Stamkos and Kucherov. Defense
Edmund.
won them the Stanley Cup. And they had Vasilevsky behind him. But who knows, like it's like poor Marty Brodeur had to listen to that all his life. It's like, is it me or is it Scott Stevens and Scott Niedermayer?
With the Leafs, I just want to ask you about them. You kind of intimated it, but just is Samsonov or Wall the goalie, and how good's their decor? Is it just they add to their defense at the deadline? Like, what do you make of this Leafs team that has always struggled in the playoffs? As you
the unknowns are Woll and Klingberg. We don't know his health. Like he was banged up a couple of years ago and seemed to fall off the map. I don't know that their goaltending is going to cost them, but I don't have great confidence that it's the next coming of Roy or Brodeur. And as far as the defense, I think, just listening to Nick and Justin Kiprios and Bourne on the show with Elliot and David the other night, I kind of agree with Nick. It's just not there yet. It gives me that feeling, that they needed Matthias Ekholm. That's why I think Edmonton, Darnell Nurse and Evan Bouchard, you can just see him. It's getting there and coming in waves with him. And I like, even the other night I was out in Calgary watching a preseason game, and they had a situation 1-1 game. They were trailing 1-0 to Calgary in the last minute, and they pulled the goalie, who was Jack Campbell, who was amazing that night. And they sent out Vincent Desharnais, and Desharnais shot to the front of the net lightning fast and right to the front of the net, created the screen for Dylan Holloway to fire the tying goal. So he's got he's a big guy, and if he can find he still turned over the puck that night a couple of times. But yeah, they have a good defense. And I think, around Quinn Hughes, Vancouver will try to build that. I love what Ottawa's got in, Chychrun and Shabbat and Jake Sanderson as the three key guys. What Kevin Bieksa would call the triumvirate. So, yeah, I think that's Ottawa's got a bright future on the blue line.
Just before I let you go, do you have a Stanley Cup prediction? You've talked about Edmonton. Just maybe who makes the finals. It's just fun.
I think
I'm not holding to you on this in June.
No,
Ron, don't worry about it. But
and I'm not worried about it. I think Colorado will be right back in the mix. They fell out of it last year. I do think, like a lot of us, have an eye on New Jersey. How soon can they get to the final? They're right there almost. Florida will be strong again. Carolina is going to be excellent. So, I wouldn't be shocked to see a Carolina-Edmonton Stanley Cup final.
Well, thank you so much, Ron, for taking the time and doing this. I know you're a busy man, and I just want to give you the floor. Is there anything you want to kind of plug for Hockey Night in Canada? And is this are you going to reveal that this is your last year, or that you have 5 more years to
3
go?
Years. Yeah, the Rogers deal goes 3 years.
Yes.
So we're all kind of locked in for 3 years.
For 3 years.
Yeah, you're always one on camera away from retired.
There you go. I'm sure
not my choice.
I'm sure not the case for you, Ron. But so anything kind of like new at Sportsnet that you want to maybe kind of share?
No, I just looking forward to the outdoor game on the 29th of October. Is kind of a neat kickstart. Carrie and I had the chance to be out west a lot. Dana and Kyle got married in Canmore, and I was out at Sylvan Lake, is where I grew up, in Red Deer. So Battle of Alberta is kind of first on the front burner. But I think there's just tremendous excitement. Every team in Canada has at least one player worth the price of admission, and often two. So that's a nice way to get through. We've had a beautiful fall here, but snow's about to fly. So get your favorite drink and enjoy.
Well, for your sake, Ron, I'm hoping it's a Leafs, as a Sens fan, it's a Leafs Edmonton final, because then you might get like overtime and a double the paycheck, because I'm sure that Sportsnet would really enjoy that. So I hope for your sake that that's maybe the final, and you work as you always do late into June. And thanks so much for taking the time and doing this, Ron.
Pleasure, Alex. Yeah, lovely.